Hello and welcome to the privacy training for HMIS at NCCEH. My name is Andrea Carey and I will guide you through today's training. I'm a system administrator for the North Carolina Coalition to End Homelessness. Today's agenda will follow these three guidelines. First, we'll start off with defining some principles of privacy, security, and consent that guide our system. Then we'll work through the documentation and tools that explain and support our privacy policies. And finally, we'll talk about access to HMIS and to client data. And that will include user authentication as well as physical access. To start out, we'll define some common terms. First off, continuums of care, also known as COC. These are the planning bodies charged with guiding the local response to homelessness. The COC is responsible for designating the HMIS lead agency to operate HMIS and participating in the structures, the advisory board, to oversee effective operations of HMIS. These are the bodies that design our privacy policies. The Homeless Management Information System is what HMIS stands for, and this is our data system that meets HUD's HMIS requirements and is used to measure homelessness and the effectiveness of related service delivery systems. The HMIS is also the primary reporting tool for HUD homeless service grants, as well as for other public streams of funding related to homelessness. HMIS at NCCEH, which is also referred to as just HMIS, is our HMIS implementation for Durham, North Carolina Balanced Estate, and Orange Continuums of Care. HMIS at NCCEH is operated by the North Carolina Coalition to End Homelessness. You can find out more information about our implementation online at ncceh.org/HMIS/about. Personally Identifying Information, or PII, is a category of sensitive information that is associated with an individual client. It should be accessed only on a strict need-to-know basis and handled and stored with care. Service Point, or SP, is our HMIS software developed and managed by our vendor WellSky to fulfill HUD's HMIS requirements. Defining privacy, security, and consent. These principles inform how we all should approach issues of privacy, security, and consent. Based off these principles, the COCs and NCCEH have developed the policies and procedures to facilitate your important work with clients. First, confidentiality and need to know. Information we learn from clients or about clients can be very personal and sensitive. Clients trust us to treat their information as private and only disclose information when other staff or organizations need to know for the client's benefit. Respecting the confidential nature of client information is our first commitment. Information is confidential by default. Choice and consent. We also work to maximize client choice when disclosing information and to receive the client's permission to use their information when we think sharing it beyond our agency is needed. Consent is usually written, so agencies have that record, but under some circumstances may be verbal. Right to refuse refers to the client's right not to disclose or share their own information without repercussions to housing services. That is a specific choice clients can make. Data management processes should balance a person's right to privacy with the benefit to the COC of sharing that important information. For example, consent, if given, is for organizations or agencies to use and disclose information, and is not limited to specific staff members present. Lastly, we recognize that the further the disclosure, the greater the risk of a privacy or security breach. Regardless of the mechanism for disclosure, once information is disclosed outside of a secure electronic database, it is much more susceptible to security breaches. The foundation for our privacy policies comes from the HMIS security standards through HUD section 580.35. Security standards as provided in this section are directed to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of all HMIS information, protect against any reasonably anticipated threats or hazards to security, and ensure compliance by end users. Protect against any reasonably anticipated threats or hazards to security and ensure compliance by end users. HIPAA-covered entities have additional requirements and procedures for privacy and security. You know who you are. Documents and tools. If you'd like, you can follow along with your own copy of the following documents and tools by visiting ncceh.org/HMIS/administrative. Some people may find it helpful at this point to pause the training and print out copies of the HMIS Privacy Notice and Release of Information. We will also reference the HMIS Privacy Sign and HMIS Policies and Procedures, but in a less line-by-line way. HMIS Privacy Sign. Agencies must post the HMIS Privacy Sign at the intake or comparable location with general reasons for data collection and reference to the privacy policy. You'll see here it will look like a full-page square with text. The text of our HMIS Privacy Sign acknowledges the type of information and the reasons why we collect information. The privacy sign also outlines how some information may be shared with other providers in the community and certain rights for clients. Next, we'll take a look at the privacy notice, which outlines the majority of our privacy policies for data collection and entry. Actions for agencies. First, you'll want to make sure your copy of the privacy notice has your agency name inserted at the top. This document is a template that can be incorporated into another agency policy for privacy practices. However, if your agency uses this template, make sure that your agency name is at the top. And contact person is included at the end. Clients must be able to contact this person to make a complaint or to ask a question about our privacy practices. After the title and a basic description of HMIS, the privacy notice describes the standard information that is visible in HMIS unless the client declines permission in a release of information. Standard information that is used to search for client profiles and for deduplication are the full name, year of birth, age, which is separate, gender, veteran status, and a partial Social Security number, the last 4 digits. Next up, allowable uses. Agencies may use a client's personally identifiable information for these 4 purposes. We'll consider a few examples as we review. To provide or coordinate services on behalf of an individual or household. This includes regular coordination with community partners such as McKinney-Vento liaisons. For functions related to payment or reimbursement for services, and this relates to funding requirements. It's better for everyone that y'all are getting paid. To carry out administrative functions, including but not limited to legal, audit, personnel, oversight, and management functions. And this includes many of your interactions with our staff at the data center to help you manage your data, or for creating de-identified, personally identifying information. And this includes the procedure for client search and deduplication practiced in HMIS. Let's consider some more guidelines and examples for how to use client information. Client info should be used for completing enrollments and assessments for clients served by your agency, referring clients to other services and/or agencies, creating case notes and tracking client progress, and coordinating services for a client. Client info should not be used for personal gain, biased opinions, fraud, stalking, sharing with others outside of service providers, or for sheer curiosity. Continuing to the end of page 1 and through page 2, the privacy notice outlines allowable disclosures of client information. Here are the allowable disclosures. 1. Required by law. We may use or disclose a client's personally identifying information when such use is required by law, subject to the requirements of such law. Agencies participating in HMIS must comply with federal, state, and local confidentiality laws. 2. For serious threats to health or safety. We may use or disclose a client's personally identifying information when necessary to prevent a serious threat to their health and safety or the health and safety of the public or another person. Any disclosure, however, would only be to someone able to help prevent the threat. Abuse, neglect, or domestic violence. We may disclose personally identifying information when the disclosure relates to victims of domestic violence, abuse, neglect, or the abuse or neglect of a child, or an adult who is physically or mentally incapacitated, where the disclosure is required by law. A client agrees to such disclosure, or the disclosure is authorized by law, and we believe it is necessary to prevent harm to the client or other potential victims. 4. Research. Subject to certain restrictions, we may use or disclose personally identifying information for approved academic research conducted by an individual or institution that has a formal relationship with us, and a written research agreement that requires researchers and data recipients to protect clients' personally identifying information. 5. Law enforcement purposes. Subject to certain restrictions, we may disclose a client's personally identifying information under these certain circumstances. Other, even if the client agrees or does not object, the foregoing uses and disclosures may also be limited by certain North Carolina laws governing pharmacy, mental health facility, or nursing facility records, or records related to controlled substance abuse and communicable diseases. In summary, we all still have to follow the federal, state, and local laws, and on occasion, information will be used for formal research to further service delivery to clients. The section on authorized use and disclosure is next. For anything beyond the list of allowable uses and disclosures, agencies must ask for written authorization from the client. The next section is about the destruction or de-identification of historic data. This is a HUD requirement fulfilled by NCCEH as the HMIS lead agency, and client information that is inactive after 7 years must be disposed of. The next section reviews the individual rights of clients. We will review this where it's repeated in the release of information portion of this training, because that is where you'll likely need to review these rights with clients. The concluding section of the privacy notice acknowledges that changes to privacy policies may occur and still apply to clients. All staff within an agency using HMIS must have read and understood the privacy notice. Staff must provide the privacy notice to clients upon request and be able to explain it. HMIS at NCCEH Release of Information. This is the consent documentation that we use for data collection on all adults 18 and older. Fill in your agency name before printing this document so you don't have to write it out each time. Let's start with the introduction. The introduction describes the purpose of the ROI. In particular, it says this document outlines how we use and protect your information. Agencies only collect information that is considered appropriate for getting you housed. From here, the specific list of allowable uses for client information begins. This is the same list we reviewed in the privacy notice. These uses have slightly modified wording to be more understandable for clients, but the meaning is the same. To coordinate, to comply with funding and oversight requirements, and to deduplicate clients. So, what's allowed with who? Sharing information within your agency is allowed. Agencies may infer consent for the allowable uses in the privacy notice and the written policies and procedures because clients are presenting for services. But clients must consent to visibility in HMIS outside of your agency. There are 2 sections for this. Section 1 asks for consent for standard information to be visible in HMIS at NCCEH. Section 2 asks for consent for more information to be visible within local or regional coordinating groups. Finally, our ROI includes consent to share information outside of HMIS and outside of your agency in Section 3. There will be consent documented for each of these sections at the end of the ROI. Consent to visibility in HMIS but outside of your agency. Section 1, Standard Information. Section 1 outlines the standard information that is visible in HMIS for search and deduplication purposes. Again, this is the client's name, age, year of birth, gender, veteran status, and last 4 of the Social Security number. If the client does not want this information visible, contact the data center immediately. We are scrolling down to Section 2, covering consent to visibility in HMIS but outside of your agency. Section 2 reviews HMIS data visibility. Additional information beyond the standard information is visible in HMIS according to agency agreements. Examples of these agreements are regional sharing groups, coordinated entry sharing groups, special population sharing groups such as veterans. Agencies included in HMIS data visibility groups can be found at ncceh.org/HMIS/client consent and looked up by the agency clients signed the ROI with. If a client presented to Heading Home Housing, they could find that agency online to see what other agencies can view specific information. Clients may refuse to share to a particular agency within your visibility group. Contact the data center immediately to ensure HMIS reflects this. So what other information is shared about clients in HMIS with these agencies? Information that are in the client profile and project start, interim, and exit assessments in HMIS. This is demographic information such as race, veteran, date of birth, income and benefit information, disability information according to HUD's categories and definition, program enrollment, needs and services such as start and end dates and service transactions, homeless history, domestic violence status, and housing assessment, which in most of our communities is the VI-SPDAC. A reminder, clients always have the right to not know or refuse any of this information, but it's important that clients know what sorts of personal and health information will be visible to those outside of your agency within our database. Now we'll look at the section for consent to share outside of HMIS and outside of your agency. Section 3 reviews sharing information with coordinating groups. This is the information shared for coordinated entry, by name list meetings, and/or case conferencing. This group will include agencies that are participating in HMIS, but will also include partners that do not participate. This could be domestic violence or human trafficking agencies, the VA Medical Center, or privately funded service providers. I want to highlight one particular line that this means that your information may be discussed verbally, in writing, electronically, or in documents downloaded from HMIS. Specifically, this includes information to identify appropriate resources and services, determine prioritization for housing, make referrals, and determine participant progress. The full list of agencies participating in this coordinating group can also be found at ncceh.org/HMIS/client consent. What information is shared about clients in HMIS with these other agencies? All of the information included in the list for HMIS data visibility and coordinated entry notes, which may not have been entered into HMIS. Okay, so let's review. 3 sections extend consent over more data to more partners. Section 1, for standard information, makes data visible across HMIS at NCCEH. Section 2 for HMIS data visibility extends visibility across a HMIS visibility group, and that group is referenced online. Section 3, the coordinating group, shares across the coordinating group outside of HMIS. Now let's talk about the client's rights. These rights can be summarized as the right to refuse to give information and not to be denied services for it, the right to not be discriminated against based on any information clients provide related to race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, familial status, and actual or perceived sexual orientation, gender identity, or marital status. The right to our policies, which would be more details from the privacy notice. The right to your information. Clients can see their information, change their information, and request a copy. The right to withdraw consent through written notice to the contact person listed in the privacy notice. And the right to confidentiality. Anything outside of the allowable uses and disclosures in the privacy notice can only be shared with written consent. Client consent. Client consent for 1 year. Clients must initial next to each section, either yes or no for consent. To complete the release of information, the client or authorized representative must sign and date the document, as well as list any dependents that this release applies to. Most commonly, this will be children under 18. Remember, all adults 18 and over will need to give their own consent unless they have a guardian or authorized representative. More detail is included in the HMIS at NCCEH policies and procedures. You can find this at ncceh.org/HMIS/administrative. If HMIS poses a safety risk. If a client is a victim of abuse, neglect, or domestic violence, or if a client reports that she is a victim of abuse, neglect, or domestic violence, a more detailed discussion about HMIS with the client is recommended. Lock visibility to the standard information so that only the serving agency may see the record. Use the right to refuse sharing if the client has HMIS data visibility with other agencies. Use the right to be entered as an unnamed record, masking identifying information as a randomly generated number, or using the right to have a client profile inactivated in HMIS. Note: security of hard copy files. Agencies may create a paper record by printing the assessment screens located in HMIS or using the paper forms provided. Let's see about what you should do if you come across these situations. So what if a client exercises their right to secure their record for a DV situation or other clients? What you'll want to do is contact the data center. If the client will not share with any outside agencies, add an eROI set to no and attach the scanned copy of the ROI document if possible. What if someone asks for information that you can't share? It may be uncomfortable, but we recommend that you reply, "I know that you mean best, but I cannot share that information." You may even want to mention that you need written consent from the client in order to share that additional information. And what if you find or believe there could be a risk to client privacy and security? Make sure you contact the data center immediately. We can help you document, test, and solve that issue. Here are some other important documents referenced in the policies and procedures. The Agency Participation Agreement, and this is between NCCEH and the HMIS participating agencies. The HMIS User Agreement and Code of Ethics. This document is what each HMIS user signs to define the HMIS standards of conduct. And the Privacy Script, which is a conversation guide provided to help staff explain privacy rights to clients in a standardized way. Access to data. The privacy and security of client information is also bound by HMIS access and user authorization. License basics. Each person has a unique username and password in HMIS. Do not share these logins. This allows for personal accountability. Automatic security functions. ServicePoint requires a password change every 45 days. ServicePoint will log out after a period of time passes without active use. ServicePoint will lock you out after 3 failed login attempts. And there is SSL encryption. SSL stands for Secure Sockets Layer, but more importantly, this encryption is signaled by the HTTPS in front of our HMIS website. Good password management is also a critical piece of HMIS access and authorization. ServicePoint requires that passwords include at least one number, at least one symbol, at least one lowercase letter, and at least one uppercase letter, for a total of 8 characters. We recommend that your passwords do not include common or personally meaningful words, phrases, or dates, sequences like 1, 2, 3 or ABCD, or repeated passwords between different sites. Next, physical access. The physical security of your computer is just as important as its technical security. Make sure that your computer is in a locked office or cubicle within a locked area, that computer monitors are pointed away from the view of others, and/or a privacy screen is used, that computers are locked, requiring a password after it has gone into screensaver mode, and if you need to leave your computer, lock it so that no one else can use it. When finished using your computer, turn it off. Protect against unintended access to client information by protecting your emails as well. Emails can be forwarded or printed against our privacy practices, so be aware. Never email sensitive information such as social security numbers. You may want to include a confidentiality notice on all emails. Here's an example from a local permanent supportive housing partner. A best practice for limiting physical access to client information is using a private space for assessments. The assessment space and experience should be designed to allow people to safely reveal sensitive information or safety issues. For this, allow for both visual and auditory privacy, allow assessors to gather information from each adult in the household in separate interviews if appropriate. Sensitive information might include the disclosure of mental illness, physical disabilities, gender identity, or abuse. Some tips for creating a private environment is using privacy screens or to employ white noise such as a fan or a radio on a low volume. Finally, here are some examples of access violations. Staff having clients sign blank releases in order to fill in at a later date when they are needed. The use of general releases. This is actually prohibited by state and federal law. Staff discussions within professional settings, or informal case discussions that occur on site where others, without a need to know, may overhear. Staff identifying individuals as clients at social events, self-help groups, or in public. Client files left in an open area for others to see. Additional resources. Additional information can be found on our website. We have a privacy page set up with some best practices and review of privacy principles in general. Also on that page is the Keep NC Safe Guide. This is a great one-sheet for keeping by the computer station or for frontline staff to remember basic principles of privacy and security for data entry. We also have the HMIS Requirements Proposed Rule. This link specifically jumps to the Privacy and Security section, which is kind of the foundation for our privacy requirements and our approach to privacy. And then finally, we have a resource from the Federal Trade Commission for consumers called onguardonline.gov, and this reviews a broad array of tips for avoiding scams, avoiding phishing, avoiding viruses and malware online. All right, you did it. Thank you for completing the privacy training for HMIS at NCCEH. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to the data center directly